Hello, welcome to another episode of Project Woman TV, where we talk all things women. That's from sex, that's from periods, that's from men, that's from work. So my name's Faye Reid, founder of 9 to 5 Menopause, and my co-host is the lovely Abby, who's going to introduce herself.
Why, hi there, wonderful people. My name is Abby. I am a female health liberator and the founder of Project Woman, an online collective changing the voice and communication around women's health because it needs it, right? And with us today, we have, now I'm not going to apologise for myself because I'm coming to perimenopause. Words fall out of my brain as quickly as they go into them. So I shall be reading from my little list up here, okay? Thank you very much. No apologies here for perimenopausal brain. Oh no. So we are talking to the very beautiful PJ Livett, relationships and sex educator. She talks about, and I bloody love this, art, sex education, relationship skills, healthy relationships without awkwardness. Welcome, PJ, my darling. Really good to have you here. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great, thank you.
Sweet. Now, I want to dive into this. So on PJ's website, right? I mean, it blew my mind. At the age of 14, PJ wanted to be a sexual therapist. And apparently, the teacher at a parents' evening leaned over to her mum and dad and whispered, "Did you know your daughter wants to be a sexual therapist?" And her mum and dad turned around and went, "Yes, isn't it fabulous?" Where are these parents? I want them to come on Project Woman.
I am biased, but they are pretty amazing.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, PJ, how do you know? Like, I mean, before we stepped on her, I said to you, all I knew at the age of 14 was, you know, that I wanted to perhaps sleep with Mark out of Take That. And Faye says she wanted to sleep with Ross. I mean, you can't account for any taste, can you? But never mind.
We'll come back to that one, Abby. Hello, PJ. Now, I'm going to ask a question. I'm coming back to you, Abby. Don't you worry. I'm going to ask a question. So, obviously, your parents were very quite liberal and open-minded and such forth. And the fact they were happy for you to be thinking of wanting to be a sex therapist. Was you sexually active at that age?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. And we come from a really principled, moral family, actually. So they were really open about the subject and talking about it, but there were values. Sex is something to be valued. So I was really brought up with that sort of view. And I was really comfortable with that as I became older, a teenager and into adulthood. I shared that value. So, it's always something very precious to protect and not just, because I see now the harm actually of a lot of people where they've looked for self-affirmation through sex and it breaks them often. It leaves them really empty. So, it just happened to be we were just an open family to chat about stuff, but it didn't kind of compromise any of our morals and values.
How did you get to that conclusion? Yeah, I mean, I know you said that was what you thought you wanted to be at that age.
Yeah,
but that is that's a strong belief, isn't it? At such a young age.
Yeah, it was like a little seed sown in my heart. I knew I wanted to work in the field of relationships and sex ed, and at the time, I thought sexual therapy would be a good route. So I did a psychology degree and then had the view to go through the counselling and specialise. But I actually got to the point when I started, after my degree and I was working, I ended up working with some year 10 and 11 students. And it was a light bulb moment because it was like saying, actually, rather than wait until further down the line when relationships have already broken down, if we invest in the young people, give them the empowerment and the tools they need, they're going to be much better armed when they get into these encounters. You know, before the emotions get involved, they're going to have the knowledge. They're going to know what they're looking for. So it was one of those massive moments. I thought this is where we need to invest. And so went down the avenue and became an accredited relationships and sex educator. So then started working with young people, which I still do, but this is now expanded. So I now work with young adults and including people at the YMCA, and I do staff training, but also domestic abuse survivors. So I see the full cycle where I'm working with young people. You know, we're talking about red flag relationships and we're talking about what do you want? Think aspirationally. What means a lot to you? What do you value? Because you've got the right to experience healthy relationships.
So I think...
Sorry,
no, carry on. Sorry.
Go from that cycle of investing in the young people And actually, what was fascinating, there was one student I remember locally who was only 14. It was all anonymous, but they were in the class. So I knew they were 14. And after we talked about gaslighting and various other bits of subtle emotional abuse and things, they'd said, I will no longer let him treat me in an unhealthy way. And I realised in that moment that that person had not only identified what they were experiencing, they could name it and they could call it out. So then I'm thinking, you know, I speak to the amazing women, domestic abuse survivors, who have said to me, we were never taught this stuff. We just didn't know. So I see this full cycle, actually. If we invest in the young people now, so they can recognise this stuff, they can name it, and they feel confident enough to call it out, they're hopefully not going to end up in one of my sessions in 10 years' time, you know, with as a survivor of some sort of abuse. So it's really powerful, but it's a privilege working with a whole plethora of people, actually, in different ages and stages of life.
I think it's really interesting, and I'm going to hold my hand up and say my perception of like a sex therapist was somebody that kind of emboldened women to just do what they wanted and have sex with who they want. So I think hearing you is just putting a different spin on it. And I like the sound of you can still have your morals and your values and such forth. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's really interesting. I never thought about it like that in terms of teaching your self-worth is what I'm getting from you.
Absolutely, that is the bottom line. So always talk about self-esteem, because young people particularly end up in situations and they are fundamentally, your self-esteem impacts your decision making. And that's so true when it comes to sex and relationships. And I think, to be honest, it probably applies to all ages, you know, if we were really honest.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do know adults now who have gone down a certain path because they desperately wanted to feel loved and respected and all those things and aspirations they had. And for whatever reason, they've just not ended up in those positions. So, you know, particularly messages from porn and those kind of like be physically attractive. You've got to do this to be wanted. Guys have got to perform in a certain way, you know, and it's all these messages which are in society. You know, we are living in a sexualized society, whether we like it or not. And those messages are out there. So actually, I think no one's immune to it. You know, if you're feeling in a low place and your self-esteem is low, the chances are you're going to hear these messages and kind of go, oh, right, okay, so that's what I need to do. So very much my work is about building the self-esteem and ensuring that young people become critical thinkers with what they see. They're empowered to make healthy choices when it comes to their own experience of sex and relationships. And also choosing to delay sex, it's perfectly valid as well. You know, there's this whole pressure again of you've got to do it, everyone's doing. And actually it's about saying, what do you want? What does it look like? What does a relationship look like for you? And that will be different for all of us. And I always, when I'm in a room with young people, I always think of the 1%. So, you know, it doesn't matter who they are. I try and see the person in front of me, not their sex or their gender. And it's very much about that kind of just knowing that actually potentially someone somewhere may have had an abortion. They may be in an abusive relationship. They may not want sex. They may be asexual, not experience sexual attraction. All that's okay. Fundamentally, we come back to you deserve and have the right to experience healthy relationships. You know, whatever else comes with that, because we are so much more than just sex, you know, as humans. It's just one part of who we are, our sexuality. So this is very much about saying, you know, you deserve to experience healthy relationships. So what does that look like for you? And just giving them space to talk about it and explore it. Because so often we don't have those chances. And before you know it, you're falling into a relationship and you're not quite sure if it is what you want and you're kind of snowballing. And I always teach them about that gut feeling, you know, that kind of not quite right. And that's there to keep you safe. So it's about saying, if you feel that, notice it. You know, love yourself enough to walk away if you need to.
Do you know what you've said? And I've never heard this in regard to sex. And for me, this is a fundamental issue in regards to female health and probably men's health as well, is the value of sex. What do you value in sex? What is it that you want from sex? You know, and you talk about the pornographic side of things. I don't think there's anything wrong with porn. What I do see there being an issue with is young adults spending so much time looking at it on a screen and not experiencing sex in reality, which then distorts that experience when they actually do have it. And then for women to know what choices they have, because as I've always said, a woman really, we've not had permission of our bodies for a very long time. You know, we haven't, you know, up until 1992, the law stated that a woman had to give sex no matter what if she chose to be married. And if a man took sex without her consent, it wasn't considered rape because she was married. 1992. I mean, phenomenal, right? So we can see that these anxieties and these misconceptions and these misunderstandings about what do I value? What am I allowed to give? What am I allowed to keep to myself? There's so much distortion there. Does this ever come up for you, PJ?
Absolutely. And I've got you know, young adults who have it's a bit like when you're a dentist and people talk to you about your teeth issues. They tend to kind of realize what I do, and then it all kind of happens. So I've had them talk to me about their own experiences, and you know, I love the fact they're honest. It's wonderful. So because rePHRASE, the business, is all about creating that space for conversation. So I know that there are young men, teenagers and young men in their 20s who are now suffering from impotency. It is no longer an old man's problem. So erectile dysfunction is one of the consequences of watching too much porn, because, as you've said, when you have so much stimulation, the dopamine's released and it's connected to what you're watching. It literally rewires your neural pathways. So your brain gets to a place where actually it needs that level to have any kind of arousal physically. So when you're with a partner in real life, it just doesn't happen. You know, and these people are with people they find really attractive, they adore them, but there's physiologically something that's changed, so they then physically can't get aroused when they're with them. So it's kind of saying, you know, it's your choice, absolutely, but please know the information, have the facts, and it can have this impact if you do watch a lot of it. I always describe it to students, it's a bit like a field of grass, and if you're walking through the same path all the time, you'd create a proper pathway. And that's the same kind of thing. The more we watch something or we do something that releases dopamine, that's how the rewiring begins to happen. And so then our bodies need that stimulation to have a certain reaction. So it's just about informing the young people, really, because it does impact. And I know older couples who have either got broken relationships or actually ended up in divorce because of pornography. So it is something that it's very distorted in what it is. But when people watch it and perhaps think that's how we need to behave or that's what our sex life should look like, there's this kind of disconnect between reality and what they're watching. So I always say communication is absolutely paramount in any relationship. So be honest, talk about it, and if you know, just agree what you're happy with as a couple.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say it's really interesting because I think men do play a major part in this, and I've just been thinking, like, how would you approach it for someone that's kind of been indoctrined, male and female, around the Andrew Tate narrative, where they feel like women should be obey what they want, and when they want sex, women should give it up. And it kind of scares me when I hear women actually advocating that as well, like just going, yes, you should submit to your man and all the rest of it. How would you approach that if someone came to you because you would know that's not right?
Yeah, and this is the challenge, because it's a narrative, and I think part of the issue is possibly we've left out the young boys for a while out of the conversation, and so actually we need to include them, and they are part of that solution. But ultimately, I think it's a gap. They've got a gap, and Andrew Tate and people like him will be before, and they'll come after, you know, but they are filling that gap. And ultimately, we're all human, so when we're hurt, we want to blame someone or something.
Yeah.
So you know, if you've got lads who are not learning about their emotions, how to identify them, how to name them, how to deal with them, and then they get hurt and rejected, what do they do with that? They get angry, they blame. And actually it's very easy then when someone like Andrew Tate, who, you know, is perceived to be exceptionally successful on certain levels, you know, and the guys are watching going, actually that's masculinity. So actually I think we need to redefine what masculinity actually is. And, you know, anger is an emotion. So, you know, boys feel emotions as well, but it's about getting that conversation going, so they don't feel defensive, that we're not targeting them. But it comes back to mutual respect, doesn't it, at the end of the day, and consent. And actually, you know, when you're with someone, sex is something you do with someone, not to someone. So if you want a great sexual experience and you want them to have a great sexual experience, then you need consent, you need communication, and probably contraception. So you're not stressed about getting pregnant if you don't want to be pregnant. So it's the three C's in my mind. But yeah, absolutely, it's about this conversation and what does masculinity look like? Because at the moment they are identifying it with someone like him, and actually there's so much more to being a real man. You know, a real man. Strength is showing who you really are, isn't it? It's your emotions, and it's being in tune with what you want and respecting other human beings regardless of sex.
Yeah. But you know, I feel that this understanding, this recalibration of what masculinity is will come from when we accept more of that feminine. You know, and I you know, we've got to look at it when we look back in the past, and it feels like it's so out of date now, and it almost feels like it didn't happen, but it still does. A boy shouldn't cry, a boy has to be manly, has to, you know, and a girl plays with a sink and a washing machine, and you know, it's all those really cliched, really boring things that supposedly define what masculine and feminine stand for, but actually we know that that's not true. And for me, I have this strong belief that when a woman truly knows her health, like when she knows about the menstrual cycle and how to live with it, when she knows how to traverse perimenopause and menopause, when she's got all of that down, there's this confidence within her that she can communicate. And so we're gonna heal this miscommunication between men and women. I really believe that when a woman gets this confidence in her body, when she trusts herself, when she's got her autonomy, there's going to be this leveling out. And it's not that we are equal, because we're different, but we will be equal, but not that we're fighting to be more like men. I hope that came out right, or not right. I hope that came out well. But that's what I feel this whole masculine and feminine issue is. There's too much of the masculine, and also there's like almost an abuse of the masculine, really, because you know, we now know that men committing suicide, you know, that their mental health is all starting to just bubble up now, isn't it? We're just starting to get this communication come through. So I'm interested to know, who is more receptive in your talks? Is it men or women, girls, boys? You know, who's more interested?
Depends on the topic. I mean, the most popular sort of workshops that I run or do the interactive presentations are around the healthy relationships right through to abuse, those kind of topics. Then there's one about self-esteem, body image and social media. And there's another one which is the impact of porn on sex and relationships. They're the three main areas, which kind of probably reflects where we are as society, and you know, where schools and organisations are wanting that extra input. I always get feedback from the workshops, because it's really important to hear the student voice, or whoever I'm working with, whether they're adults or younger people, because you can't beat that, and that's so powerful. And it's a mixed bag, it's anonymous. So what I could notice within a classroom, for example, I do get the boys as well engaging. And it's very much about being impartial and just letting them have that safe space. Because so often I think they're given this message about, like you said, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't cry, whatever it is. So it is just literally about raising the topic and going, you know, that's really interesting. What makes you think that? Allowing them to be heard. You know, it might be the first time that they're actually being heard. And as teenagers, their brains don't develop until they're about 25. So they're still very much going through, what do I think? Who am I? And what do I believe? And where does all this fit? So, you know, if we are not talking to them about sex and relationships in a healthy way, we've got to ask ourselves, where are they going to turn to? And it will be things like pornography or their peers. So you can then get a repeat cycle of this kind of false messaging. And in terms of watching porn, the impact on the actual performers, a lot of female performers don't last longer than 3 months in the industry because of the damage done to their bodies.
3 months?
Yeah, that's not a side you see, because you see lots of short edited versions of this incredible intensity, and that's a sexual experience. And actually there's so much more that goes into it. And that damage there, you don't see the emotional or the physical damage, because that's not going to make the money. So the more distorted and extreme it is, the more money's made, so they keep them up in the game. It's all about money, not about sex. ultimately the porn industry. So it's very much when you've got kids, particularly who've got no frame of reference, they look at that and go, oh, that's sex, that's what I need to do. So you can see how, unless we talk about this and break down the kind of taboos and shame around the whole sex relationships topic, you're going to get another generation of potentially real, a lot of misinformation.
So speaking about breaking down barriers and discussions, I got introduced to PJ through a networking event, and I was sitting across from the wonderful Andy, who I hope will be watching this when this goes out. And I told him what I do, and he said, "You need to speak to PJ Livett." And I said, "Oh, okay, fine." And he said, "Yeah, she gets her vaginas out in her talks." So then my ears just completely went, right, yes, I want to meet this woman. She gets her vagina out? She gets her vaginas. I went, she's got more than one? I thought, I want to meet this woman. And then obviously now we know, but correction, they're not vaginas, they're vulvas.
Yay!
And this is a big shout out to Holly McNish. But again, like, what women don't know about their own physiology and their own anatomy. The outside is the vulva. It's not a vagina. The inside is the vagina. The outside is the vulva. And I just want to say, in Holly McNish's in one of her books, for which it's just gone out of my head, it's called Slug. That's it. It's just above my head. It's called Slug. One of her friends is in the playground with her daughter, who I think was about 4, and her little girl fell over. And the mum went, "Are you all right, darling?" She went, "Yeah, I just fell on my vulva, mum." And the mum said, she went, "I wanted to high five her for being so accurate and on point, but then out where there's about 100 other parents," she said, I just felt a little bit."
But this is the conversation we can have, absolutely, because this is an arm or a limb, it's just got a name, and it's no different from any other body part, but because we don't want to talk about it, and pet names are fine as long as your young people know the correct terminology. And it's not just about safeguarding or the medical needs. If you go to the GP, you can actually talk about what's going on. I heard a scenario. I know a GP herself who's allowed me to share this. It happened out of force, different area of the country. But she's a GP. She, articulate, educated, really comfortable talking about body parts. And she was sexually assaulted by one of her patients. When the police came, took the statement, she noticed the police officer wasn't writing down the exact words she was using, and was incredibly uncomfortable. So that kind of separate issue over there then impacted her more as the victim, and she felt so much shame. And she knew she didn't need to. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd referred to body parts as they are. But that shows, doesn't it? We've all got baggage, depending on our own experience of relationships and sex ed, whether that's from school or family or home. Our experiences, our religious belief, our culture, all this kind of comes into this world of, right, okay, how do I now communicate this effectively to the next generation? So we have to acknowledge, actually, we carry probably a little baggage. So I always say to parents that I work with, this ultimately is about safeguarding your young people. So however we feel about it, whether it's comfortable or not, this is about safeguarding them, and we need to educate them and inform them and empower them to know their bodies. They've got autonomy and agency. They get to choose what happens to it. They've got the right to say no. They shouldn't need to justify their no. Looking at all different angles of consent, the non-verbal as well as verbal, all that sort of stuff. Because this is how it needs to happen in terms of actually changing that sort of thought pattern, rather than something happening to a person and then going, okay, I need to just accept this because this is what happens. So it's the whole conversation about body parts is so important as well.
Hopefully, Faye hasn't left the room because we've been speaking about vulvas. I'm sure Faye.
Come back,
Faye.
Faye.
Has probably just come back, Faye. I thought Faye just had to go and check something at the door. Here she is. Are you okay, dear? The vulva's okay. Everything's okay.
It was a postman, and I was thinking to myself,
"It's so rude."
But I could hear you at the front door, and I'm thinking, I wonder if she's going to say a word. And just really quickly, this is the postman who twice I happened to open the door with just a t-shirt on. And each time he's probably looked at me to say, what is going on in there? What is going on in the house? Sorry.
She's back. Do you have any of your beautiful vulvas to hand?
I can get them if you bear with me.
Oh, amazing.
Yes.
So this is just a very non-threatening way of introducing young people to body parts, because again, you don't know about triggers, you don't know who's in the room, you don't know what experiences they've had. So this is very much about a little fun way. So we have one with grey hair there. We've got hairless on there, and we've got darker skin one there. So with these, so one student said, can you still wee if you're wearing a tampon? So she obviously didn't know about the 3 holes. So again, I've got you can actually, if you're close enough, you can see the clitoris, the urethra, and the vagina. And then you've got the labia minora, labia majora. So it's just a really,
Medora. What? That's beautiful.
I was going to say, did you call them lady something?
Labia minora and labia majora.
I thought you said lady majora. Of a. I was like, what? I've not heard this.
What's that?
That's the balls, cock and balls. No, what's that?
Oh my God! Even I'm stumped. What is that?
That is the internal clitoris.
Is it?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the part that most people are familiar with. And this is inside the vulva and nerves, and we've got the bulbs there, so all full of nerves. So the vagina effectively comes through here.
Wow.
Yeah, so about 7 centimeters in real life, but again, it's only more recently that scientists have actually realised that there's an internal structure to the clitoris. So fascinating.
They've only just realised, of course.
Oh yeah, I know what that is.
Removable foreskin. So again, if you have or haven't got a foreskin, that's okay. So we just have a little top there.
But as well, for young, because I've got a young son, and for him to understand the importance of cleanliness and how to clean, I think is so important. Yeah. These are great. This should be in more schools. It should just be really happening. A bit like menstrual cycle awareness should be happening. A bit like menopausal awareness should be happening. A bit like, oh my goodness, where do we end and start? Pregnancy. More of this. When I look at my son's schooling, I went to the parents' evening the other day, and he's 8 and he's learning about economics. He's 8. Why now? Surely that's a secondary school thing. Things like this, where it's a bit fun, very relaxed, I would have no issue with my children learning about this, so they are more confident when they go to secondary school, so that they can understand their own bodies, and so they're not ashamed by them when they go to secondary school, and they don't feel the pressure of having to do something, because if they don't, it's going to be uncool. We need a bit of a shake up, don't we? Massively.
Yeah, I had a lovely moment where I went into our local library to their they got a 3D printing facility, and I gave them the kind of the pattern, if you like, sent it in. I went to go and collect them, and it was basically, you can see them on the wall. They're actually upside down, but they are the 3D clitorises. So they're my hooks. They're actually hooks at the moment. But basically, I went in with this, and this guy printed them, and he you could just tell he wanted to ask. And I thought, I'm not going to, put it out there, because I know some people are uncomfortable, and that's okay. So I left it, and as I got to the door, he said, "Oh, excuse me, can I just ask you something?" I thought, here we go. And he said, "Are those what I think they are?" And I thought, wow, if this is amazing. And he said, "I used to be a science teacher." And so he was aware, and he knew what they were. And I thought, that's fantastic. So, again, not afraid to ask, not afraid to talk about it. It's just brilliant. It's just refreshing. But like you say, and advocating and getting it out there, really.
And I don't think it is, because I know so many people that, from generations before me, they're actually really open-minded about this. I think it's more about the opportunity to discuss it, isn't it, really, more than anything else? So I don't think it's an age thing at all, really. I think it's more of a cultural, obviously, religious aspect than anything.
Yeah, I was going to say that, because I think as much as we are kind of open to those discussions and want to learn and want to educate. I think there are some people who are just so against being educated and learning about different parts of the body. And I like the fact that, Abby, you've got a young son, and it's like, teach them young, make sure they're not embarrassed by these things. So as they get older, it's just a matter of fact. But there are so many parents that just, they would call it sexualizing their child. And I think that's where it's really sad. They're looking at it in completely the wrong way.
There's a difference between, I think the fear for some parents is that condoning. It's like, if you teach it or talk about it, you're condoning it, and it's not that at all. It's very different. It's a bit like saying, you know, you wouldn't expect a child to sit there maths GCSE without teaching them beforehand.
Yeah.
So it's not saying, I'm assuming, you know, they're going to be sexually active. Some people may choose not to be, but have the information, just bank it, and then as and when you may need it, you've got it. Because the danger is, if we don't talk about it, things will happen that will, I mean, the research from the Sex Education Forum has been brilliant. It came out last November, the latest, and it clearly shows that actually the young people who get effective relationships in sex ed are less likely to be perpetrators or victims, and more likely to be safe sexually in terms of thinking about contraception, so avoiding STIs, unwanted pregnancies. They are less likely to experience non-consensual sex. So all of this stuff, although it feels a bit daunting, actually really is important, and it's part of, you know, sexual health is like dental health and physical health and mental health. It is another part of who we are as humans. So we just need to have the conversations to make sure that people know what they need to know before they need to know it, and before emotions get involved.
Oh, do you know what, PJ? I'm so pleased you came on here to talk to us, because this has been amazing. So we always like to leave with a question, but I mean, I've got this feeling that you're just going to have this wrapped up.
I don't know the question, PJ, either.
No, she doesn't know the question. So she can't help you. What would your older self like your younger self to have said to her first sexual experience? Is there anything that you would like to have said to your first sexual experience that you might not have had the confidence to now, or there was something that you would like to have told him, like a little bit lower? No, thank you.
I think this is going to be really boring. I actually was very comfortable saying to people what I was not prepared to do. And so that's how I've raised, you know, we've raised our children to be the same, because I don't know why, but there was something in me, and it might have been from my, you know, parenting, my parents being kind of open to talk about. I knew what my aspirations were. I knew what I valued. I knew that I had value, and actually to be with somebody who wasn't going to treat me in a certain way or whatever it would be, it was just a no-go. So I think, if anything, I would just reiterate that. And that's what I try and do when I work with young people, is to make them realise that they are worth so much more. And whatever someone says to you or however they treat you does not change your value and your worth.
Beautiful. Thank you, my darling. Really great to have you on here. Well, another Project Woman TV show done and dusted. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining her.
I'm here.
Wherever you are, Faye.
I'm here. PJ, can I just say, I found that really, really interesting, and I could have talked for longer, to hear you talk for longer. So thank you for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
And PJ's details we will pop below. But if you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts or feelings about a conversation, please comment, please share, please get in touch. We are here for you, because we want to elevate this conversation. We want to make this mainstream. So please don't hold back. Please don't feel shy, and please don't feel that it's not appropriate, because it is. Thank you, gorgeous humans. Take it easy.
Thank you.